Good evening. Tonight we have a council informational to be presented by Mr. Dane Rue of the Leffingwell House Museum, and we're very glad to welcome him and members of our board and supporters. Good to see you all.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dane Rue, and I'm delighted to be here this evening, so a big thanks to Mayor Nystrom, the City Council, and all of the city officials here in Norwich to make this happen. I'm very happy to be here tonight. I'm going to do my best to project as loudly and clearly as possible, so if I stray too far from the microphone, please let me know. I am also giddy with excitement, and so if my jitters or anything of the sort begin to show, or if I start to talk really, really fast, give me a signal or throw a tomato at me, and that'll be my cue to slow down a little bit. Oh, thank you. All right. So, my name again is Dane Rue. If I have not met you yet, I am Director of Education for Slater Memorial Museum here in Norwich, and I'm also President and Chairman of the Society of the Founders of Norwich, the owners and operators of the Leffingwell House Museum here in Norwich. And I'm here before you tonight to talk about an event of monumental significance. This is something that possibly happens once in a lifetime, and I'm very excited to share this with you all tonight because this is a critical component of our history, of our colonial American history. On your desks, I did print out some packets of information that pertain to the presentation. There's three flyers stapled together, as well as some other rack cards of information that provide a supplement to this presentation. But I've titled the presentation, Lexington's Alarm, the Desperate Ride of Israel Bissell. This presentation tonight talks about, again, a significant piece of Norwich history that dates all the way back to the year 1775. And during that year, on April 19th, something happens that changes the world. The first shots ring out. It's the shot that's heard around the world, which happens at about 4:30 in the morning on the Lexington Green in Massachusetts. The American Revolution has begun. And immediately after this happens on the Lexington Green, there is an alarm that is raised. So that's where this word comes from. This alarm was a means of colonists of the day to spread information about what was happening from one colony to another. Now, if they had access to it, they would be using smartphones and computers and social media and the internet to get the message out. But back then, the only way you could relay information effectively was word of mouth. Not every town had a newspaper, and as a result, it was very difficult to communicate information back and forth. And this story centers around a gentleman by the name of Israel Bissell, who was actually from Connecticut. That was a recent discovery that I made. He was originally from East Windsor. There's a short prologue to this story that takes place between 1774 and 1775. Again, this is the precursors to what happens before the outbreak of the American Revolution, and it provides what I think is some very important historical context. I have an image here that you will probably recognize. In the year 1773, the colonists decided to take their protesting to an entirely new level by actively destroying the king's property. And this is what we're seeing here in Boston Harbor with the Boston Tea Party. This happens in the year 1773. And this action particularly aggravates and upsets our British occupiers, soon-to-be occupiers. And as a result of the Boston Tea Party, the British Parliament decides to enact punitive measures against the colonists of Boston. And those punitive measures collectively are known as the Coercive Acts or the Intolerable Acts. These were a set of measures that were designed to punish the town of Boston. Boston now is put under martial law, and British regulars are now permanently stationed in the city. One of the acts that is passed at this time in 1774, in conjunction with all of these separate acts, is called the Boston Port Act. This one was of particular concern to other cities and ports across the colonies, because what the Boston Port Act did was it closed the Port of Boston to any at all international trade. That was enormously significant in a bad way for the town of Boston. They can no longer receive ships that are not under British authority, and as a result, they are cut off from a significant amount of supplies, food, and provisions that they need to survive and maintain a life in Boston. This sends shockwaves throughout the colonies, and places such as New London, Norwich, New Haven, other port cities are wondering, are we going to be next? What ports are they going to shut down next? As a direct result to the Boston Port Act and the Coercive Acts, we see committees of correspondence begin to form in the year 1774. And the list of names here that you see are the men who are a part of the Norwich Committee of Correspondence. Captain, at the time, Jedediah Huntington, Colonel Christopher Leffingwell, Dr. Theophilus Rogers, Captain William Hubbard, and Captain Joseph Trumbull. These men comprise a critically important committee of individuals that are responsible for a number of different things, but mainly their task is to establish effective lines of communication, not just amongst themselves, but with other committees of correspondence. In fact, these committees of correspondence act as the precursors to modern-day postal routes. This is something that I learned. The roads and highways at the time that they travel started to form the early postal routes of the day, ferrying information back and forth. And so these men here are responsible for carrying information back and forth, but they're also responsible for assisting the citizens of Boston. They take up an active effort to send provisions, supplies, food, and desperately needed materials to the town of Boston. And so there's a couple of different times where I've found documents that talk a bit about the early committee efforts in 1774, and this is where they met. This home right here. This is right on Elm Avenue, right next door to Miss Philbrook's house, just about. This is the home of Azariah Lathrop, and this is the home where the Norwich Committee of Correspondence is listed to have held meetings, and during those meetings, they organized and gathered desperately needed material to send to Boston, such as money, very important, intelligence, also important, and perhaps most importantly of all, sheep. There is a significant amount of sheep that is sent to Boston, to the part where they really make known of the between 1,000 and 2,000 sheep being sent to Boston. Here's an example of one of those documents that still exists today. Sir, the Committee of Correspondence have concluded to have the sheep, which the inhabitants have offered to give the poor of Boston, collected together upon Monday, the 22nd day of this month, at Captain Benjamin Burnham's in Newitt. Burnham's Tavern is in modern-day Lisbon. From hence to proceed to Boston, the grain and money we desire may be delivered and paid to Mr. Thomas Coit at Mr. Hubbard's store at the Landing as soon as may be. They do end up getting reimbursed for a significant portion of these supplies, which is quite interesting. And they were paid to William Hubbard's store at the Landing in what is now downtown Norwich, at the Chelsea Landing, from your humble servants. There's a couple of other documents that I'll go over here briefly. April 19th, 1775, the day that Lexington and Concord actually occurs. They're still sending supplies and relief to Boston even a year later. Received from the town of Norwich by the hands of Mr. Carpenter. 25 pounds, 19 shillings, law money as a donation for the relief and support of the industrious poor in the town of Boston by means of the cruel Port Bill by David Jeffries, Esquire. That Mr. Carpenter is our own Joseph Carpenter of Norwich. That is his silversmith shop on the Norwich Town Green. April 28, 1775. Gentlemen, this moment we received a letter from New York, the 24th perhaps, letting us know that a packet had that moment just arrived with dispatches for General Gage. It's best to keep a good lookout for it. The Committee of Correspondence from New London to the Committee of Correspondence in Norwich. General Gage is the military governor stationed in Boston at the time. So here they're truly trying to watch out for intelligence being ferried back and forth. And this is what one of those documents looks like. This is the one that explains to me that they met at the home of Azariah Lathrop, and his name appears right about there. His first name is abbreviated, and then there's Lathrop as the last name. But all of these men that you see here are from Norwich. They are part of an active group, again, of people organizing to assist their brothers and sisters up in Boston, including Captain Samuel Leffingwell down there. All of this attention and all of this aid catches the eyes of everyone involved in protecting the people of Boston, including this man, Samuel Adams. In fact, he made note to thank Norwich for their efforts. He says, "The part which the town of Norwich takes in this struggle for American liberty is truly noble." 1774. That's something that's gratifying. That's really gratifying to see that our town makes it on the map here. April 19, 1775 is, of course, again, when the shot is heard around the world. The American Revolution has commenced, and again, about 4:30 in the morning, this occurs on the Lexington Green, where a small number of American colonists are facing the British, who have landed in Boston, and they are marching to Lexington and on to Concord to destroy storehouses of ammunition in order to thwart this rebellion as quickly and effectively as possible. And the man responsible for delivering the news of what happens on the Lexington Green is this man, Israel Bissell. He was born in East Windsor, Connecticut, and he is the official messenger of the Massachusetts Committee of Safety. He is someone who was, again, originally from Connecticut, but spends the rest of his life a citizen of Massachusetts. He's buried in Hinsdale, and this is his grave marker right here that I found online. After the Revolution had ended, he served the rest of his life as a humble farmer in Massachusetts. Israel Bissell is going to be going on the trip of a lifetime. He probably doesn't realize it at first, but he is about to go on the trip of a lifetime here, by starting off in Boston, just outside Boston, in a town called Watertown, Massachusetts. He makes his way from Watertown all the way across the northern colonies here. I've got a map here that is, I think, the coolest part of the presentation, and I am not going to tell you how long it took me to make this. I spent quite a bit of time trying to piece this all together. But the great thing about the history about the Lexington Alarm is we know where it went. And we know how many stops it made, and we know who notarized it every step of the way. That's what is truly amazing about this whole journey that the alarm takes. Also, for the record, there are only 3 known Lexington alarm letters to exist in the entire country. One is within the Historical Society of Pennsylvania. Another one is known to exist, but the location is not known, but the New York Public Library has a copy of it, a duplicate of it. And the third is within the museum collections of the Scottish Rite Masonic Museum in Lexington, Massachusetts. And it just so happens that is the one that was sent to Norwich. That makes it really, really special. 4:30 in the morning, the war has begun, and by 10 o'clock, Israel Bissell has his dispatches, and he gallops out of town to make his first stop. So he's in Watertown right now, about 10 o'clock in the morning, April 19, 1775. He journeys to his first stop in Worcester, Massachusetts. He gets there later in the day, and unfortunately, as he's riding extremely hard throughout this entire process, so much to the fact that his horse collapses in exhaustion and unfortunately passes away when he reaches Worcester. So that's one of the first early casualties, which is really unfortunate. But he rides nonstop. He's on the move continuously nonstop, and that's evidenced by the timestamps that we see on each of the copies that are made during this journey. He stops in Worcester, Massachusetts, and he then makes his way down through Connecticut. He stops in Pomfret, to where he delivers the news to General Israel Putnam. And General Putnam at the time, as the story goes, was plowing his fields. And when he heard the news of what happened, as the legend goes, he left the plow in the middle of the field and immediately started for Boston. He then goes on to Brooklyn, where the copy of the, I'm sorry, I got these confused. He stops in Brooklyn and then Pomfret. Got my towns mixed up, excuse me. In Brooklyn is where a gentleman by the name of Daniel Tyler notarizes the copy to be sent to Norwich, and that is the next stop. Bissell has been writing for about 24 hours now, and he reaches Norwich the day later, on April 20th, 1775. He then proceeds to New London. The next stop he makes is in Lyme. He continues on to Old Saybrook, Guilford, Brantford, and New Haven. And he's now about another day's time has passed in between this leg of the journey. He continues from New Haven, makes one last stop in Connecticut at the town of Fairfield, and continues on to New York, where the alarm gets into the hands of General Alexander McDougall, who notarizes it. And the final leg is here. He goes from New York, makes a stop in Elizabeth, New Jersey, New Brunswick, and Trenton, before he finally ends up in Philadelphia on April 24th. He rides continuously, again, non-stop, for a total of nearly 350 miles. This man is on horseback, and thankfully the traffic wasn't too bad on those days. So he made very good time. He made very good time. Let me put this into perspective. He rode 350 miles in approximately 5 days. When George Washington was elected president, the news didn't get from Philadelphia to Boston until about 9 days. It took about 9 days for that event to happen. So for this to happen, again, such a short amount of time is incredible. And Israel Bissell also carries notes with him saying that every time he is to stop, whoever he has made contact with, they have to make every effort to furnish this man a horse if he needs it. And that was quite important throughout the whole period here. So again, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 individual stops that we know about, with many, many more offshoots along the way. So, what did he deliver to Norwich? He delivered this. This is the document that is in the care of the Scottish Rite Masonic Museum and Library in Lexington, Massachusetts. And it is one of the original 3 copies of the Lexington alarm letter known to exist. We do not know the location of the very first alarm letter to be written. It's either lost or is in someone's attic somewhere. We're not entirely sure where the original one was. I'm not going to force you to read all of this because I've got it transcribed for you. But what I want you to see up close is this. To Christopher Leffingwell, Esquire, or either the Committee of Correspondence, Norwich. That's really the incredible part of this document. It gives me goosebumps inside, knowing that, again, this is something of national significance. This is really something of national significance that is happening right now. Christopher Leffingwell is the so-called de facto head of the Committee of Correspondence, and with good reason. He was one of the city's most prominent citizens, and he had access to almost anybody you could imagine. Almost anyone you could imagine. He was a businessman, a citizen, and a patriot, all wrapped up in one. He's somebody who I kind of wish I knew in person. So this is what the alarm letter says. April 19th, 1775, Watertown, Wednesday morning near 10 o'clock. To all the friends of American liberty, be it known that this morning, before break of day, a brigade consisting of about 1,000 or 1,200 men landed at Phipps Farm at Cambridge and marched to Lexington where they found a company of our colony militia in arms, upon whom they fired without any provocation, and killed 6 men and wounded 4 others. By an express from Boston this moment, we find another brigade are now upon their march from Boston, supposed to be about 1,000. I have spoken with several persons who have seen the dead and wounded. Pray let the delegates from this colony to Connecticut see this. They know. From Joseph Palmer, who was the chair of the Massachusetts Committee of Safety. And that was delivered directly to Christopher Leffingwell at his house, which of course is still standing, one of Norwich's iconic landmarks. And this alarm is coming back to Leffingwell's Tavern on April 20th, 2019. Exactly 244 years when it was originally sent. Like I said, Christopher Leffingwell was really the perfect man to receive this alarm because he had the means and the access of spreading that information further. And this was probably by sheer coincidence, but 2 other of Connecticut's most important men were also with him that day. So who else received information of the alarm? It wasn't just Christopher Leffingwell, it was also General Jedediah Huntington, who was a neighbor of Christopher's, so it's not too out of the question to find out that they were together that day discussing the business of the day or what have you. And General Jedediah Huntington has a wonderful story in and of himself. He is a member of the Sons of Liberty and, of course, the Committee of Correspondence by 1774, and he is one of George Washington's most trusted generals. He did not see a significant amount of field action compared to other Continental Army commanders of the day, but he stuck with Washington through thick and thin and was by his side and a very, very fierce ally of Washington's until the end of the war. Washington writes a letter to Huntington after he retires, stating how much he really valued Huntington's loyalty and devotion. Jonathan Trumbull is also there as well, the governor of Connecticut at the time. So again, it couldn't have been a better happening for Israel Bissell to find all 3 of these men at the same location. Governor Trumbull was a new governor at the time. He took over from our previously loyalist governor, and he was again one of the big champions of Connecticut. Without his leadership, Connecticut would not be where it is today. He was quite active. And what did Governor Trumbull do after receiving information of the alarm? Well, at first he was almost skeptical. He almost believed that this couldn't be real. To actually think that we're at war now, he was initially a little bit doubtful, but it didn't take long for him to realize this is the real deal. And he immediately heads back to Lebanon and opens up a structure on his property to become a Central War Office for the state of Connecticut, which still exists today, and immediately activates all of the available militia regiments that are ready to march to Boston. And one of those was Huntington's regiment. He was the commander of the 20th Militia Regiment in Connecticut. So he immediately marches to Boston, or Cambridge, rather. This man needs no introduction, but it bears mentioning that he also was in New Haven at the time that the Lexington alarm letter reached New Haven. So what did Benedict Arnold do when he received the information? He did essentially what Governor Trumbull and General Huntington did. He immediately responded to the call by activating his regiment of militia to march to Cambridge. And he almost had a bit of trouble at first, but he was able to navigate around it. Initially, he needed to get the keys to the stockhouse to obtain ammunition and supplies, and he couldn't get the keys at first. They were denying him the keys, so he essentially threatened them and said, "If you don't get these keys, I'm going to bust the door down." And so he got the keys and marched his men up to Cambridge. And it's also worth noting that his regiment was commented on a number of times as being the most well-trained and the best dressed out of all of the soldiers that made it to Boston. How many soldiers ended up, or actually, how many militia actually ended up in Boston? thousands and thousands of them. And again, this response was part of a collaborative effort that we see here in Connecticut and the surrounding colonies. And so I'm going to wrap up here just by, again, going over briefly what's going to be happening over the next month or so that you can experience the revolution and experience the Lexington Alarm Letter for yourself. On April 6, 2019 is the opening day of the Leffingwell House Museum, where you can come down to the museum and witness a recreation of the delivery of the alarm letter with a short presentation afterwards. We're doing this because of the fact that we're only getting the alarm letter for one day. And so we want everyone to at least have some ability to see the history here. So if for some reason you cannot make it on April 20th, you are invited to come on opening day to see a recreation of the delivery of the alarm. I'll be there dressed up as Christopher Leffingwell, and I will be receiving the copy, facsimile of the alarm. And there'll be plenty of other, great demonstrations happening at the house. And on April 20th, we will be receiving the original alarm letter. It will be on display from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. for one day only. That's the only way we were able to get this thing. I just want to make that very clear. I reached out to the curators at the Scottish Rite Masonic Museum, who have been immensely helpful throughout this whole process. They're really excited that Christopher Leffingwell's copy of the letter is coming back to Norwich. And when it leaves Lexington early in the morning on April 20th, if you can imagine it going down the Mass Pike and down 395, it's basically taking the same route. It's basically retracing Israel Bissell's route. That alone, I think, is tremendous. So again, one day only you have this opportunity, because otherwise they're going to charge us an extraordinary amount of money for security and on all sorts of other bells and whistles that are required by a museum of their standing. But again, they've been immensely helpful throughout this process. And this is a formal invitation to the council, to the city, and to everybody in this room to come experience the revolution and experience this letter in the flesh. This is the real thing coming on display here. Like I said, this is an event not just of local and statewide significance, but this is of national significance. We live in a city where we have history and experiences that you cannot find anywhere else in the state and anywhere else in the country. And this is an example of it. So we really want you to come and be a part of this very special occasion. Thank you very much for the opportunity tonight. I can take any questions if anyone has any. Yes.
Anyone have a quick question? Yes.
I just want to thank you for the wonderful presentation, and for me, on a personal note, for me to think that in 1734, which is the earliest documentation of my house, these gentlemen either walked by or rode their horses or by some means went from what is now Dr. Akis's house to Jedediah Hunt. It boggles my mind. It's fascinating. Fascinating. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes, also on the green, and I have it up here, but I didn't mention the green. But there's going to be a lot happening all at the same time on April 6th. We'll have the reenactment of the receiving the alarm letter, and on the Norwich Town Green, we will be hosting the British 54th Regiment of Foot at 1 o'clock, and they will be engaging with the 5th Connecticut Regiment. So the literal British are coming. The literal British are coming, and you have to see it. Again, this is only happening that one day on April 6th, so definitely make it a point to come out and see it. Yep, they'll be drilling all morning. It's going to be an active scene on April 6th, that's for sure. We'll open right at 11, and then we'll do a couple of reenactments throughout the day based on attendance, and the actual skirmish will occur at 1 o'clock. Yeah, they'll be on our property still. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. If everyone would please rise, we'll be led in prayer by President Pro Tem Bill Nash.
Almighty God, we ask for your blessings upon the members of this council as we assemble here in this chamber to conduct the ongoing business of our city. With your guidance, we will strive to ensure that all of our decisions are for the common good, and your inspiration will instill respect, compassion, and thoughtfulness in all of our deliberations. Give us the strength and wisdom to lead by example as the people's representative, and that peace and harmony will mark all our proceedings and keep us faithful to the trust placed in us by the citizens of your community. Amen.
Alderwoman Joan Philbrook, please. Pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If you would please remain standing, I would ask us all to stand for a moment of silence on the passing of Mr. Hector Balageron, who previously served the city as an alderman, and he actually held many, many hats throughout the community and the city. He was very active at St. Patrick's Cathedral. When I was a young boy, he was active in Boy Scouts of America and was Scoutmaster for Troop 5 at St. Pat's as well. But Hector touched many, many lives in our community, and he's going to be dearly missed, and our thoughts and prayers should go out to his family. If you would please join with me. Thank you.
Citizen comment general.
I declare citizen comment general open, and anyone who wants to speak about any particular issue before the council, please do so, and at the microphone, please state your name and address for the public record. If anyone would like to begin, the floor is open. Anyone like to speak under citizen comment general? Anyone under citizen comment general? Seeing no one, then for the third time, I declare it closed, and thank you.
The city manager's report.
Thank you. This is the city manager's report for March 18th, 2019. I attended a meeting at the Capitol along with the mayor and local legislators regarding the proposed legislation regarding the future of casino gambling in Connecticut. I attended a special meeting of the Harbor Management Commission regarding the Small Harbor Improvement Program, acronym SHIP, grants through the Connecticut Port Authority. The dock at Brown Park is in need of repair, and the project falls within the scope of the grant. An engineered cost estimate of the repair is the first step in the process at a cost of $1,500. I attended the monthly public safety meeting and met with the fire chiefs regarding the council resolution that was approved on February 19th regarding the analysis of the city's fire apparatus. Each chief has an apparatus spreadsheet to complete and return to me by the next meeting. The mayor and I met with NPU representatives and planning staff regarding the Sustainable Connecticut Municipal Certification Program. Sustainable Connecticut is a voluntary certification program that recognizes thriving and resilient municipalities in Connecticut. The program is designed to allow communities to get recognition for existing sustainability policies, programs, and projects, such as brownfield redevelopment, arts and culture, education programs, energy efficiency measures, green fleets, and more. An informational session will be scheduled for the City Council on April 15th meeting. I provided a letter of testimony in support of HB 7319, an act concerning fiscal independence of school districts. The bill will increase transparency in our education budgets by having the Board of Education go directly to the voters for support of their budgets and defend the proposed expenditures. The 2019 Neighborhood Assistance Act program proposal applications are available through the State of Connecticut Department of Revenue Services website. A press release was sent to the newspapers and posted on the city's website and Facebook. The city manager's office will be accepting neighborhood assistance applications until May 31st, 2019, with a public hearing scheduled for June 3rd to ensure that the applications can be submitted to the state before the July 1st deadline. The spring recreation brochure is now available. 10,000 copies were printed, with 3,500 distributed via the Norwich Bulletin. The brochures are distributed to every public and parochial school and are available at local restaurants and City Hall. The Finance Department received notification from the federal EPA that they had conducted the audit of the city-wide brownfield assessment grant. There were no findings or recommendations reported. I've attached the key financial indicators report for 8 months ending February 28th from Comptroller Josh Partier. And that concludes my report for this evening.
Thank you. Are there questions of the city manager? Yes, Alderwoman Philbrick.
In regards to the engineered cost estimate, the cost of the estimate is $1,500,
Yes.
and the funding source for that?
The budget of the Harbor Commission.
Okay, because their budget's only, what, like $4,000?
Yep, they have it.
Okay, and then my second and last question is, what is the date of the next meeting that you're having with the fire chiefs, please?
It's in April. Bear with me. I will. Let me look it up and I will get it back to you. It's somewhere the second or third week in April.
And how is that information disseminated to the council and/or the Public Safety Committee?
What information is that?
The information that you have, that you gather when you meet with the fire chiefs?
It'll be submitted when I submit the report.
Oh, okay, the September 3rd?
Yeah.
Okay, thank
Or
you.
before.
Yeah.
I'm aiming to do it before that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there further questions? Seeing none. Thank you again, John.
You're welcome.
Citizen comment on resolutions.
I declare citizen comment on resolutions open. The first person signed up is Mr. Bob Staley.
Good evening, I'm Bob Staley. I live at 18 Montgomery Lane in Norwich, and I am a commissioner of the Norwich Public Utilities. I come here to speak in favor of the reappointment of Steve Becker. He has been an outstanding member of the Utilities Commission, and he's very well versed in what goes on. I think that it's important to understand a couple of important things, though. I mean, first of all, there has been some discussion about us not being adequately involved in economic development. I think that's absolutely incorrect. Yeah, I think that if you look at the people at Ponema Mills or at Nalis Engineering that's moving into the industrial park, or a host of others, including the ACLS Laundry, which nearly moved out of town, but we were able to negotiate with them and keep them here, and they may actually expand now, or at least expand their workforce. We've been intimately involved in economic development. We help support NCDC. I and Chris LaRose sit on the NCDC board. It is not something that we take lightly, and we are not preoccupied with extending service outside of Norwich. Secondly, I think there's been some confusion about the Optimus project. The Optimus project was approved administratively as a result of a 1999 agreement with the state. The state has essentially taken steps to make sure that water is available throughout the state. We are obligated to provide water for Basra if they request it. In this particular case, they did request it. They will pay for all of the capital improvements, so there is no expenditure by Norwich Public Utilities or our ratepayers to extend the water line. So we essentially get new revenue from the water that's going to be used for no cost. And a portion of that will go to taxpayers. But what I think is the most important thing about renaming Steve to the commission is that this has been a very tough year, as I'm sure you all know. We have had to really start to rebuild Norwich Public Utilities in many ways. We have a forensic audit that will be done in another month or so. That showed a lot of problems in terms of the authority of the chairman versus the board, and salary increases and other benefits that were approved. We will be doing new bylaws in another month or two, completely new bylaws, completely new policies and procedures. We've been working for 6 months on a new strategy. That strategy will be much more involved with economic development, among other things, and it'll be much more detailed. It was never released before. It was always kept as a draft. We will release it. So that's essentially my pitch.
Thank you so much. Mr. Marvin Cerruto.
Marvin Cerruto, 100 Star Street, Norwich, Connecticut, United States of America. I just wish to speak on resolution number 11. And first and foremost, of course, I support and encourage the improvement of our law enforcement here in Norwich. However, I see dollar signs, and I'm encouraging a thorough discussion on a network like this with regards to training, replacement costs, maintenance costs, liabilities, operation, that sort of thing, possible more personnel. And I thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Stu Peel.
Stuart Peel, 133 Mediterranean Lane. I'm also on the MPU Commission. I'm speaking this evening in support of Stephen Becker for his reappointment on the MPU Commission. Stephen is a valued member of our board and brings special talents and knowledge, including manufacturing, finance, real estate, and of course politics. Stephen has the respect of the board and of senior management at MPU. I can't think of a reason why the council would not want to reappoint Stephen, although I've heard through the grapevine that there may be an issue concerning economic development that reasonable people can disagree on. Making no predictions on where that issue will land, one thing I strongly believe, during that debate, Norwich will be made better by having Stephen's voice in the room. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Grace Jones.
Grace Sawyer Jones, 11 Tanglewood Drive, Norwich. Thank you for this opportunity. I want you to know, and I think you do, that the commissioners have worked extraordinarily hard and extraordinarily well the past 6 to 9 months. I think it's important that you know that, because that same collaborative spirit needs to carry on and be sustained as we now move into the process of doing some rebuilding, but more than anything else, to establish a firm base for which this fine utility carries on. I hope you will be able to see that as you go through the process this evening, that we have managed to be cohesive and cooperative and collaborative in getting our work done, and it was not easy work. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Goldblatt, please.
I didn't know I was speaking tonight, but I want to thank whoever put my name on the list. I also support Steve. I think we need his expertise. The others didn't mention that Steve has had actual construction experience in water and sewer plants. And the 800-pound gorilla in the room for NPU right now is a $140 million state-mandated sewer project. And, you know, whether or not the pros and cons of going outside of Norwich to get these water customers from Basra and other towns, you know, is positive with everybody. I think, you know, we can't not go outside of town when we have an opportunity, and apparently we have a mandate to do it anyway, legally. But we need the money. We're making money every day on these new water customers. If we're going to spend $140 million, you know, we can't be turning away a lead pipe cinch business where these people are just going to come on and pay us, and they're going to pay for all the infrastructure, so we're making more profit on these customers than we're making on Norwich customers. And furthermore, if we have to wait till every property in Norwich is fully utilized, that means we have to wait forever, because it's never going to happen. So I don't think that's a fair position to take myself. I think we're doing the right thing, and I'm proud of what we're doing. And I hope Steve can stay on, because he's been a big part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else like to speak under citizen comment on the resolutions? Yes, sir.
Good evening, Darrell Wilson, 32nd Street, Norwich, Connecticut. I'm actually going to be speaking in favor of Resolution 11. I think it's a no-brainer. I think our chief has done a wonderful job in taking our police department always thinking to a next level. I think the dollar amount makes sense, and at a time where law enforcement across the country is under attack, this also brings a new level of sense of security to individuals, both wearing the badge and those that they protect. So I think it's a no-brainer as far as the body cameras, as far as the cameras in some of our valuable places here in the city. So I would suspect with the opportunities of reimbursements, the cost, it makes total sense. We're not paying an extremely large cost compared to what we could be paying, and to utilize the opportunity and benefits that our voters several years back passed for us to utilize this funds for. I think it's a no-brainer. They did a wonderful job in getting help with the radio system, and this is just another piece that tackles a greater need of safety for our officers, a greater need of safety for our residents, and helps us in the long run in many different areas. So I hope you guys support Resolution 11. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else join us on the citizen comment? Yes, sir.
Good evening. Glenn Carberry, 27 Greenwich Court. I'm here to speak in favor of Resolution number 7 to appoint Steve Becker again. I look at this issue from 3 personal perspectives. My first perspective is as a Norwich resident interested in seeing our city thrive. I'm confident that Steve Becker is a positive force for change on the board. I've known Steve for many, many years, but I wouldn't be here tonight supporting his reappointment if I had any concerns about his dedication, knowledge, and commitment to improving NPU and leaving any past mistakes behind. I believe we can count on Steve to ask questions, find answers, and serve the people of Norwich. My second personal perspective is as a utility lawyer. Handling public utility regulation issues at the Connecticut Public Utilities Authority has been actually the major part of my legal practice for the past 20 years. This experience has given me a national perspective on best practices for commissioners and staff people in the industry. Steve has, from my experience, the temperament and also the broad perspective to look beyond Norwich when needed to get the job done. My final perspective is as a well-known critic of NPU in prior years. It's no secret that I publicly questioned their rates and policies for almost a decade before it became fashionable to do so.
The troublemaking I did included suing the city at one time over a large sewer increase, writing editorials in the Norwich Bulletin, questioning their approach to public policy, and urging this council on several occasions years ago without an ounce of success to exercise greater oversight over NPU. But that was then. This is now. A lot of people's attitudes and vision has changed. If we want that positive change to continue, the council should reappoint Steve Becker, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I just wanted to mention one thing. You mentioned passing of people. A good friend of mine and a very good friend of Norwich passed a week or so ago, and that was Michael Doyle. He was head of the governor's Eastern office under Rowland and Rell for about 11 or 12 years. And I don't think a lot of people realize quietly behind the scene, he was a real strong advocate for Norwich up there. And he died at only 58 years old. So we miss him, and I would just take that aside. I'm sorry for doing so.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to join us on the citizen comment? Anyone else under citizen comment? Third and final time. Seeing no one else, I declare it closed, and thank you all for sharing your concerns and ideas.
Resolution 1, relative to reappointments as regular members to the Commission on the City Plan.
A motion, please, to bring it forward. President Pro Tem Nash, second Alderwoman Gould. Is there discussion? Yes, please.
I just want to say that I want to thank Kathy Wazika and Frank Manfredi both to be willing to continue to serve on the Commission on the City Plan. I think their areas of expertise give a new level to the Commission, and I am glad that they are willing to continue to serve.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? It's unanimous. The vote is 7-0.
Number 2, relative to a reappointment as an alternate member to the Commission on City Plan.
Motion, please, bring it forward. Pro Tem Nash, second. Alderwoman Gould. Is there discussion? Yes, Alderwoman Gould.
Again, I want to thank Swanjay Bataille to, again, be willing to serve as an alternate to the Commission on the City Plan, bring some very thoughtful discussion to the Commission, and I'm pleased that he is willing to be serve again for another 2 years.
Thank you. Are there further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? It's unanimous. Vote is 7-0.
Number 3, relative to an appointment as a regular member to the Norwich Historic Commission.
Motion, please. Pro Tem Nash, second Alderwoman Gould. Is there discussion? Yes,
Just for
Alderwoman Philbrook.
clarification, unless I'm missing something, it's as a regular member, and then in the resolution it says as an alternate. Does that
Yes,
make any
he is
sense?
an alternate.
Okay.
The resolution is correct.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you for that, Alderman Philbrook. Is there further discussion or comment? Seeing none, all those in favor? The unanimous, and for the public record, his name is Gregory William Johnson, who is being appointed. Vote is 7-0.
Number 4, relative to a reappointment as a regular member to the Mohegan Park Improvement and Development Advisory Committee.
Motion, please, bring it forward. Alderwoman Philbrook, second Pro Tem Nash. Is there discussion? Yes, Alderman Browning.
I work with him on the committee. He is an asset, very even-tempered. I support his nomination.
Thank you, sir. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? It's unanimous. The vote is 7-0.
Number 5, relative to a reappointment to the Youth Service Advisory Board.
Pro Tem Nash, second. Alderwoman Gould. Is there discussion? Pro Tem Nash.
I just want to strongly, I'm sure there's not much the stench in here, but Mr. McMahon is, I've worked with him, known him for over 35 years, and I can't really imagine a better person to sit on this board.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? Unanimous vote is 7-0. Again, Pat McMahon, for the record.
Number 6, relative to reappointments to the Norwich Golf Course Authority.
Motion to bring it forward. Pro Tem Nash, second, Alderwoman Gould. Is there discussion? Yes, Alderwoman Filbert.
Everybody knows that I don't hand out compliments very often. I'm kind of the negative Nelly in town. But I have to tell you, the interviews that we did with these gentlemen was absolutely amazing. To the man. There was not an ego. There was not an agenda. Every single one of them, and some of them have been on the commission for a long, long time and are up there in years. And there are some new members who are younger, but they're still getting up there. But what a delightful, dedicated group of people. I said afterwards to both Stacy and Joe that it sort of reaffirmed my sense of commitment in the city of Norwich. There's no bickering, there's no whatever. They are a great group of people who are dedicated to the continuation of the golf course as an asset for the city of Norwich, and it was a pleasure. I smiled proudly for the next 24 hours. So I fully endorse each and every one of them. Every one of them brings something different. They're very distinct personalities, but a cohesive group, and it was a pleasure to interview them.
Thank you very much. Is there further discussion? For the public's benefit, the nominees are Michael Driscoll, John Paul Marine, Charles Whitty, Richard Pedergel, Richard Strauss, Robert Maloff, David DiBattista, and Barney Corfield. All those in favor? It's unanimous. The vote is 7-0.
Number 7, relative to a reappointment to the Board of Public Utilities Commissioners Sewer Authority.
Motion to bring it forward, please. Pro Tem Nass, second, Alderwoman Gould. Is there discussion? Yes, Alderwoman DeLucia.
So we heard a lot about this tonight. I was happy to hear that my concerns be quoted at the podium. It means that you're taking some of the things that I put forward seriously, and I appreciate that. I'd also like to say that this is not about, in my mind, this is not about Stephen Becker as the man. It's about what I believe I want to see from the commissioners at NPU. But before I get into the comments that I prepared, I just want to address one thing that was said at the podium. I understand about the state's interest in regionalizing our water supply, but that does not include the sewer system. That does not include our gas system, okay? And it does not include, in my mind, giving away the store to a certain degree. That's the way I see it. I know that there is disagreement on that, and that's fine. I'll get back to my comments. I believe that the utility, to that point, I believe that the utility should not be expanding into the surrounding towns with lower mill rates at the expense of the Norwich Grand List. It is really as simple as that. To me, my responsibility here is city first, utility second. I understand that the utility is your first concern, and that is where we are going to differ. Until, I did say, I put in writing, until every property in Norwich is performing at its highest level, access to our utility system, to the extent that we control it, should be the carrot that Norwich has to offer to developers. Mr. Becker intends to continue, well, has stated that he intends to support continuing the expansion, and that puts the interests of NPU and real estate brokers like himself above the interests of the city of Norwich. So our positions are incongruent. I believe, and I have said many times, that the 10% payment to the city should not be passed on to ratepayers. Okay, it is the cost of the utility doing business and having a monopoly in the city. Mr. Becker, in our conversations, not only insisted that the payment continue to be passed on, but his ultimate position was that we should stop collecting that altogether, change the charter and not take that money at all. Okay? That, to me, that position is in the best interest of the utility. Okay? But it works to the detriment of the city and its taxpayers that own the utility. Mr. Becker, admittedly, represented property in Basra that required water and sewer and gas connections so that a project could be moved forward. I believe that Mr. Becker should have recused himself from the vote to extend those utilities. I understand that there was an administrative piece to it. However, I'm looking at leadership. The board is the leadership that I'm going to turn to. Okay? My simple statement is that I cannot support a candidate for reappointment whose philosophies are longitudinally opposed to mine. It is my responsibility, along with the rest of my colleagues on the council, to choose based on what I believe is in the best interest of the city, based on the information I have to work with. This is not personal. In my mind, a new general manager is not change enough at NPU. The presentation we saw last month is not change enough. The public has heard a lot from the members of this council demanding change at NPU. Well, tonight, we'll see who else up here is going to act on their demands for greater change. Thank you.
Thank you. Just for the public record, it was stated earlier, there was no vote of the board. So there was nothing to recluse anyone's vote from. It never went to the board. I don't want anyone here or listening on television coming away with the fact that there was a vote of the board. Sale of utilities is done administratively. It doesn't go to the board. Any further comment of the members? Yes, Alderman Gould.
I will be in support of this resolution for the reappointment of Stephen Becker to the Board of Public Utilities Commissioners. Mr. Becker is a lifelong resident of Norwich, and I believe that he cares a great deal about our city and that he is encouraged by the renaissance and revitalization that is happening in Norwich. As a former private sector business owner, he brings to the Commission a wealth of knowledge that can be applied to business in the public sector. He possesses a thoughtful and common-sense approach to the discussion and the decisions that are made by the members of the Commission on behalf of the utility and the ratepayers. Providing utilities outside of Norwich isn't anything new. Just ask the towns of Preston, Lisbon, Sprague. Ask Foxwoods. Ask Mohegan Sun. Ask Wheelabrator. They purchase one or more of our services. The sale of these services to our neighboring towns generates revenue to the Norwich Public Utilities, and in turn adds to the 10% contribution that the utility makes to our general fund, generating new sources of revenue by expanding our customer base helps stabilize our rates. Each and every year, the cost of goods and commodities continues to increase, and ultimately, without new customers, rates will only need to be adjusted upwards. Norwich is 28 square miles and is not getting any larger. We have a limited number of parcels available for development, both clean and the brownfields. I want nothing more to see our grand list grow. New potential developers might have the patience, maybe even the resolve, and maybe the wherewithal to take their project from a vision to a reality on these contaminated sites, but many will not. The cost of cleanup will deter them from the challenge, and they will seek parcels outside of buildable outside of Norwich on buildable land. We need to be able to meet the needs of these developers, whether it's inside or outside our borders. Steve Becker isn't afraid to ask questions. He has the ability to lead and the ability to build consensus within the board. He will continue to help move Norwich Public Utilities out from under the dark cloud of Derbygate and bring it into the bright light that reflects what our utility is, a diamond, and a utility operation that the citizens of Norwich continue to be proud of. Eversource and UI will continue to try to emulate our utility, but they will never be able to duplicate the reliable and excellent service that we count on each and every day. We need Steve Becker to be reappointed to Utilities Commission.
Thank you. Is there further comment? Yes, Alderwoman Burnham.
Thank you. I can certainly appreciate all of the testimony here tonight, and I think that this is an important discussion and discourse that we're having. I think it's actually a long time coming that we're having this discourse. It's just unfortunate that we've only just been able to have this discourse in the past month or so. From my perspective, as I've stated before in front of most of the people here, I do not feel that the current Board of Commissioners has done enough to earn back the public's trust, and that they have the ratepayers and taxpayers' best interests at heart as much of the philosophy that we're debating tonight. Not only that, as somebody, I think Mr. Carberry mentioned, not with respect to this council, but I'm referring to it in this council. This council and the council before this one has done the absolute bare minimum with respect to the multitude of issues, not just Derbygate, the multitude of issues that have arisen at NPU. We've seemingly abdicated our oversight responsibility, and this is the first opportunity that we have to make the change that we all know is so badly needed to send the board onto a new direction and get new perspectives. There was a statement, you know, the past 6 to 9 months we've really been making. But that was reactive. That was reactive. We need proactive solutions. What's been going on in the past 3 years in terms of solving these problems? Paired that with the want, the blatantly stated want to bolster the revenue of NPU by undermining investment in Norwich. It seems that we're hearing excuses and reasoning as to why we just can't do it. There's plenty of places that don't have virgin land. There's plenty of places that need brownfield redevelopment that have figured out a way. We are not looking to best practice. We are not looking at collaboration, coordination. Manhattan doesn't have any. I know we're not Manhattan. Don't get me wrong. It's not the best analogy, but they don't have virgin land, and it's expensive to go there, but somehow businesses make it happen. And I think we need to find people that are looking for creative solutions about how we can grow the grand list and not give away our resources, and that to be able to draw businesses to. I think we can do better. We all, like Alderman DeLucia has said, we all have said that changes need to be made. Changes need to be made. We can't just do more of the same. And it's no disrespect. Your service is appreciated. Anybody who serves for that long and gives that much time is appreciated. I feel that we need to change. We need new voices. So I don't think I can support this, and we're going to make a change. And if we put our money where our mouth is, let's start now.
Thank you. Is there further comment? Alderwoman Philbrick?
Well, I have known Steve Becker and his wife and his family for not that long. But my experience with Mr. Becker has been that he's a straight shooter. I trust him. He's honest. Does he always say the things that I want him to say? Absolutely not. And I respect him for that. I'm going to make an analogy because I'm getting a sense here tonight that makes me very uncomfortable. We had a session in this chamber at a period of time not so long ago when an employee was being sort of vilified in the chamber, and I said that I would stand with that person. and I stand with Mr. Becker. You want change? The whole city of Norwich needs change. It's not all about NPU. It's a collaborative problem. It's something that we need to work on as a group. To change the course or change the direction midstream, I believe will cause more havoc and more destruction than stopping. Mr. Becker he's a nice man, and I don't put people in positions because I think they're nice or they're not nice. I vote for people to go into positions because I feel that they meet the criteria of that position. And I feel that Mr. Becker does that, and I support him 100%.
Thank you. Pro Tem Nash, please.
I'll just make a quick comment because I did hear some things. And then many of the things that Alderman DeLucia said, I do agree with in many, many, many ways. However, the one thing I have noticed with Mr. Becker, and he and I have had some discussions that were heated, and the one thing I find with Mr. Becker, quite different from myself, is that he stays even-keeled, he stays focused, and he stays disciplined in his conversations with you. You don't have to agree. I don't put people in positions necessarily because I agree with them. I don't agree with some of his philosophies that he has. However, he is a gentleman that you can sit and talk to and have a conversation and sway sometimes with your beliefs and your strengths. I have sat here for a few years, and I've voted many times against NPU's decisions. The pipeline out to Sprague I voted against. I voted many times against. I also voted to open a charter, and I believe that NPU should pay 12% to the city of Norwich without passing it on to the ratepayers. And I strongly believe in that. Again, that's something that Mr. Becker and I have discussed, and he doesn't agree with that, but that's fine. I'm not voting for him tonight, and I will be voting for him tonight, but I'm not voting for him because he agrees with everything I say. I'm voting with him because he has his own mind, and I think right now the NPU board needs his hand on the tiller to move it forward and keep assisting the individuals that are on there with him. And I think giving him a full term on the commission is the best way to see. Listen, he's not going to sit there forever. And the next council can come up here and get rid of him if they want. But as of right now, I think he's a good selection. I worked with him on a few things, and I will continue to agree with him on some and disagree with him on others. And I think that that's a relationship we as, I hate to use this word, but we as politicians need to work together. And just because we don't agree with someone, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. That's I guess what I'm trying to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Just Alderman Browning.
I'd first like to ask a question to our Corporation Counsel, just to make sure I'm correct on a legal question. There's a statute from the 1940s which says that the city cannot collect money from NPU as part of its 10% for sewer and water, correct?
If it is, it was done away with in 1951 when they redid the charter.
Because I remember a long discussion I had when I first got involved in politics in 2015, maybe the head of the manager of NPU can correct me on this, where using the rationale that it was a public good, it did not allow entities outside the utility to collect a percentage of commission on either water or sewer. Am I somehow wrong on that?
The city's been selling water to the state hospital since 1913.
Sorry?
It only applies to sewer, but we do not collect 10%. 10% we do collect from water.
Okay, thank you very much. I share Alderman DeLucia's concern about expanding outside the city of Norwich, water and sewer, and basically incentivizing development. I mean, I recognize that some people think it's a great thing if you have developers that are able to make something happen in southeastern Connecticut. My concern is with Norwich only. Call me parochial, but I will be voting against. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? My brief comments will then follow. It's been said that we need change. Well, I present to you a board and commission that was changed There were 4 new members on this board over the last 3 years, and 4 previous members who did not hold the best interests of the city of Norwich, and we know exactly what they cost us, are no longer here. So the council, at least the majority of members who are on this current council, have already acted in that manner and removed those people. And I'm not going to go into a list of who they are, because I don't think that does us any good. But I'm going to support this nominee. Thank you. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And those opposed? The motion carries 4-3. Thank you.
Number 8, relative to the sale of beer and wine at Rock the Docks 2019 at Howard T. Brown Park and Rock in the Green on the Norwich Town Green concert series.
Motion, please bring it forward. Pro Tem Nash, second. Alderman Gould. Is there discussion? Yes, Alderman Browning.
This is an event we sponsor each year. I think it has widespread support. Once again, it's the Greater Norwich Area Chamber of Commerce, and they do sell beer and wine as a way of subsidizing this effort. I support it, and I hope you do as well.
Thank you, sir. Is there, yes, Pro Tem Nash.
Well, I want to jump on Alderman Browning's. Listen, get out to these events. Any of these Wednesday nights, you drive down by the harbor or even by the green, and it's packed. And that's a good positive thing for Norwich, because obviously people are enjoying these events, so please get out to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Yes, Alderman Burnham.
Well, and while the park is packed, Howard T. Brown is packed on Wednesdays, the Friday evening concerts on the Norwich Town Green, I look forward to that every year. It is the most relaxing, serene, enjoyable event throughout the summer. So I think this is fantastic that we're continuing this.
Thank you. Is there further comment? Seeing none, all those in favor? It is unanimous. Vote is 7-0.
Number 9, relative to listing property at 482 through 492 Norwich Avenue.
Motion, please bring it forward. Pro Tem Nash, second. Alderman Gould. Is there discussion? Alderman Browning.
This has been down at the Public Works Committee for about a year. Anyone who wants to see the background can read the minutes. I will be voting against it because I believe that this building, which is a 6-unit building which was damaged by fire, it's over in the Taffville area. In my view, it is a very, lousy is an unscientific word, but it's not a very good piece of property. I would prefer to see it torn down. You would say, okay, well, how much would that cost? We had a very soft estimate of $100,000. On the other hand, it provides a demand on our social services and our education. Typically, when it was intact, we were receiving about $7,500 a year in taxes. Typically, based on its companions, it's one of 3 buildings which are very similar. Typically, we would have 8 to 10 school children in each building. I would vote against remedying this building and putting it on the market. I'd prefer to see it torn down. I recognize that it will probably be a losing vote, but I think that you really, if you want to look at our taxes, our cost of living in Norwich, occasionally I think a building should be pruned out of the total structures here, and this would be one of them in my personal opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there further discussion? Alderwoman Gould.
Be voting in favor of this resolution. We just talked about we need to redevelop the properties in Norwich and give MPU more ratepayers. So here's an opportunity for this piece of property to be sold, redeveloped, put back on the tax rolls, and give MPU a new customer.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Resolution 9? All those opposed? Thank you. The vote passes. The resolution count is 6-1.
Number 10, relative to amend aggregate sums representing motor vehicle and personal property taxes on the grand list October 1st, 2016, being transferred to the suspense account.
A motion, please, bring her forward. Pro Tem Nash, second Alderwoman Gould. Is there discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Thank you. Vote is 7-0.
Number 11, relative to funding from the $3.2 million Public Safety Equipment Ordinance number 1755 for the purchase of police body cameras and for cameras in the viaduct parking lot.
Thank you. Motion to bring her forward. Pro Tem Nash, second Alderwoman Gould. Is there discussion? Alderman DeLucia.
In form of a question, Mr. Mayor, do we need to amend the last paragraph to include the cruiser cams? Do we need to get that far down into the weeds? I defer to Corporation Counsel.
It's the total of $130,000 to be used for the purchase of police body cameras and mounted cameras in the viaduct parking lot. I think in terms of what the intention is, that's probably clear enough.
Speak up a little bit, please, or speak into your
Okay.
microphone. Thank you.
I'm sorry. I'm not sure what your question was, if you don't mind repeating it.
The question being, at Wednesday's public safety meeting, the chief mentioned personal body cams for police officers, cameras in the cruisers, and then a subsequent discussion with the mayor was the additional cameras for the viaduct parking lot. The cruiser cams are not, the cruiser cameras are not listed here.
I don't know that any monies are being expended for those. The chief might be able to answer that question.
Patrick, please, for the public record, approach the mic.
This money, funding will cover body-worn cameras for the officers and 25 in-car cruiser cameras. So I guess the question that Alderman DeLucia and Philbrook have, do we need to amend the ordinance to make sure we're covering everything properly? Because the discussion was police body cameras and in-car cameras. It's my fault in talking with the comptroller about crafting the ordinance. We all I just roll everything in as body cameras, but it's actually police, officer-worn cameras, and then in-car cruiser cameras.
Well, this is a resolution that you're acting on tonight, so it can be amended tonight and voted on it. So I think you should amend it to include them if the money's going to be spent on them.
Alderman DeLucia.
I move we amend the last paragraph to include, the terminology would just be in-car.
In-car cameras. 25 in-car cameras, if you want to get down to the...
Well,
Are you seconding the motion?
Yeah, I'll second the motion.
Motion seconded by Pro Tem Nash. As the amendment before us. Pro Tem Nash.
My only concern is we know how this works. We did a bond for $3.2 million for fire trucks, and as we all know, a portion of that money was supposed to go towards police radios, and by the grace of
Senator Austin.
everybody, whatever, a lot of people put a lot of effort into it. We didn't need to do that. So, but my concern is if you start putting a number on things like 80 body cams and 25 cruise cams, and we don't have a number of how many viaduct cameras we're going to have, and then all of a sudden we're now over budgeted and we can't buy 80 cams and we can't buy 25 cruisers and we don't have money for, I'm concerned about putting the number in, and then what if it exceeds the money that we've allocated? Do we need now to come back and have to delay the program? Because I know there's a time crunch on the program.
There is a time crunch.
So I understand how we should put in the cruiser, because it's not in here, so we want to make sure that's specified to the public. But my concern is putting an exact number on it at this time, and something happens and we can't buy 80. Does the resolution have to come back before us, be re-amended, and been sent? That's all I'm concerned about. I think the way it's written is fine with the addition of the cruisers. I'm good with that, but I'm concerned about putting a number in because we see
Fair.
what happened in the fire truck situation where we...
My thoughts are hopefully with the short window that won't happen, but I do share your concern. I'm a realist, and that's
my
I don't
only
have a problem
concern
with that. That won't affect the project.
Is there further discussion on the amendment? Yes, Alderman DeLucia.
I just think following the format, we see purchase of police body cameras, in-car cameras, mounted cameras in a viaduct parking lot. To Alderman Nash's comments, where there's no quantities listed at all.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm fine with that. I just didn't want to get into that part of it.
Oh, okay, thank you. Is there further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor? It's unanimous. On the resolution as amended, is there further discussion? Yes, Alderman Browning.
I just have a question because I know we're buying the equipment. I had a conversation with Brian Kobolars, who's an expert in film. I imagine, are we going to have to get a server or any other such equipment to store the additional footage? And will we have to have an additional employee to download it, handle it, examine it? I'm just curious what the long-term costs will be for the budget.
The long-term costs for the budget are front-loaded into this proposal because of, we're hosting the data storage in-house. So included in the proposal is a large server, two actually servers that were funded through the state, reimbursable up there. So you don't have to do a yearly recurring fee if you went to a cloud-based solution. So those servers will have approximately 4 to 6 year life until you have to buy more space. So there will be something down the road. But the other option is a cloud-based solution, which you have to pay yearly fees, which can be very, very expensive. It's been split probably 50-50 between the police departments versus the in-house hosting and the cloud-based. But given Norwich and the challenges we face with technology and sustainment and committing to long-term projects, I thought it was in the best interest of the city to do a hosted with a server. As far as your second question about staffing required, believe it or not, that was always been the fear. The reason why this program goes back to, I believe it's the 2015 Public Act that started this program. The reason why we were kind of hesitant to jump into it because of the demands on the workforce to get the images, redacted images out to the public. That hasn't been the case. There's been many departments have taken advantage of this program, and they found that their requests or FOI requests for body camera footage have been nowhere near what they expected. That being said, the Los Angeles Police Department, different story. They're getting requests all the time. But in-state in Connecticut, it has not been unmanageable.
So you don't think you'll need another staff person to handle the video?
If you had asked me 5 years ago, I'd say, yeah, we might have to think about that. But what's been borne out since these cameras have rolled out, and we're on the tail end of this project, actually the tail end of it, that has not been the case.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Any further questions on the resolution as amended? Seeing none, all those in favor? It's unanimous vote of 7-0.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? Pro Tem Nash. All those in favor of adjournment? It's unanimous, 7-0.